Hello and welcome to another 4-book wrap-up. I've actually been on a kind of reading binge, at least for me this year. I slowed down my reading quite a lot this year, partly because of moving house and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. And also I didn't want to stress out about quantity over quality. I love watching films just as much as I love reading books. And finding time to do both of those things means that the amount of reading I have used to been doing over the past few years kind of has to go down. It also doesn't help that I now live really close to where I work, so much so that I often don't even take a book with me because my actual train journey is literally one stop. Anyway, recently I kind of was forced to read a lot because all my requests from the library came in at once, as they want to do, and of course all these books had more requests on them, meaning I was very much limited to that 3-week period in which I was allowed to get them out. So it was a slight race against the clock to try and get all those books finished, but I managed it. No fines were incurred, and so these are the first 4 that I read out of that bunch. So first up we have Exciting Times by Naoise Dolan. I'm pretty sure I was the first person to read this from the library. The book was so pristine and still smelt brand new, which just goes to show you don't actually need to buy new books to get that new book smell. This has inevitably been compared to Sally Rooney because it is a young Irish writer writing about a young Irish person. The protagonist is Ava and she is living in Hong Kong teaching English at a school, and the whole story revolves around her relationship with Julian, who is an English banker in Hong Kong, and her other relationship with Edith, who is a Hong Kong woman, also very wealthy, who went to boarding school in the UK. This was one of those books that was enjoyable while I was reading it, but hasn't left a huge strong impression on me. There was something about Ava that I didn't quite click with. I got the feeling she was meant to be relatable in her so-called faults that she was constantly talking about, and I personally didn't find her very relatable. I think this kind of character goes along with this trend that we have for young women characters where they don't know what to do with their lives. They're well aware that the things that they're doing are not particularly healthy for them, but they decide to do them anyway. I'm kind of a bit bored of that character by now. I'd quite like to see some competent female characters because I personally don't know any women like these characters in real life. I understand that this character is trying to get away from the traditional female stereotype of someone who is the opposite of messy and complicated in the way these women are, but in my opinion I think this is a trend towards making female characters like traditional male characters, and I don't think that's necessarily very productive. So yeah, I didn't get anything particularly meaningful or profound out of this book, but it was definitely a good read. Next, I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I coincidentally reread The Hunger Games earlier this year, so I was very ready and primed for reading a Hunger Games prequel. This is about Coriolanus Snow, who becomes President Snow in the original novels. He is, I think, around 16 years old in this book. It's set just after that whole big war has ended, so Coriolanus is still able to remember what it was like to live during the war as a child and how the war completely destroyed the House of Snow, the status of which he is absolutely obsessed with. And the Hunger Games up until this point just kind of been some kids killing each other in an arena, but this is the first time where new ideas are being tried out, and one of the ideas is to get students from Coriolanus' school to be mentors to the Hunger Games contestants. So of course Coriolanus ends up with the female tribute from District 12, whose name is Lucy Gray. I think a villain backstory can be really interesting, probably way more interesting than a hero backstory, and you can definitely tell Suzanne Collins is trying to make sure that we remember the whole time that he is a villain. You see very clearly his methods manipulating people, of charming people into getting his own way, of deceiving people into thinking his family are much more well off than they actually are. And there is of course a plot line where he falls in love with his tribute, but at the same time we're very much seeing that his love for her is a very selfish love. However, I don't think Suzanne Collins went far enough with his evilness. I guess it's a tricky thing in that he's the person that you're following throughout this whole story, and it was a very long novel, much longer than the original Hunger Games novels, and absolutely did not need to be. It was incredibly repetitive. But yeah, so I get that she needed him to be engaging enough so that we would want to follow along with him, but I kind of wanted more evilness out of it. It did not feel like we got a slow progression. In fact, it felt like we just got maybe the first glimpses of his evilness, and that you'd kind of have to continue the story to really understand how he became President Snow. I definitely didn't love the writing nearly as much as the original books. I guess it's because Katniss's voice is so unique and distinct. This is written in third person, but still so much from Coriolana's perspective that it may as well have been written in first person anyway. I'd say it's very much a book for Hunger Games completionists. If you love the series, then you're going to get something out of this, but I definitely found it lacking compared to the original 3 books. Next, I read Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge. This book was going around BookTube years ago when it first came out, and has been one that I've been meaning to read for a long time, so it's bad on my part that it took the Black Lives Matter protests recently to urge me to finally pick it up. And really, I should have read it when it first came out, because it's very much a book of its time. A lot of the information in it, for me anyway, was stuff that I have learned over the past few years through reading articles or through reading things on the internet, and stuff that I've learned in the past few months as well. I think for me, when I read a non-fiction book, I'm really wanting more personal experiences, but this very much felt more like a list of historical events and facts, which in themselves are interesting, but I think for me, I would have found it more engaging if they were interwoven with more personal experiences from Reni herself, as well as maybe other people that she interviewed. There were a couple of interviews in the book, and those parts I found the most interesting, definitely. I think for me, when reading about this topic, I will be really fascinated to read the books that are being currently written and that will come out in the next few years that are more reflective of the current times that we're living in. Definitely still a worthwhile book to read if you know absolutely nothing about the Black Lives Matter movement. It really gives fantastic background information about all the different aspects of the movement and how it intersects with so many other movements as well. Lastly, I read The Mothers by Brit Bennett. This is one of those books where I read the first page and I sort of knew I could trust the author, if that makes sense. Sometimes you just read an author's writing and you know that regardless of what they write, it's going to be well written and it's going to be really engaging. I think Brit Bennett might be one of those authors for me, at least going on this book. So this is a book kind of about 3 people. The main character is Nadia, who at the beginning of the book is 17 and has just discovered that she is pregnant and is going to have an abortion. You then have Luke, who is the pastor's son and is the guy who got her pregnant, and you also have Aubrey, who is a girl who's moved recently to the town, becomes friends with Nadia, and also becomes connected with Luke as well. The mothers are actually a group of women who go to the church called Upper Room, and they kind of introduce each chapter, and Brit Bennett uses a kind of narrative voice that is these women as a collective. She uses the word we, and they introduce each part of the story by describing it from their point of view before it turns into sort of normal narrative prose. It's a relatively short novel, but there is so much in it. It really delves into all kinds of ideas around gender, around community. It's a real deep dive into what it's like to live in this particular community in California. It's also about family dynamics, it's about friendship dynamics, and the theme that kind of connects all these things is mothers as well, with Nadia's mother dying by suicide at the beginning of the novel, and Aubrey's mother is absent, whereas you have Luke's mother almost on the opposite end of that spectrum as a controlling figure throughout his life. I just found it one of those novels that's really enjoyable to read while also having so much to say on a bunch of different ideas and themes. Basically the exact kind of literary fiction that I enjoy. I know I'm a bit behind the times and that Brit Bennett's new book is already out and I'm very excited to read that one. So that's all I have for this video. I hope you have a great day and I will see you soon. Bye!